In this video, I want to talk about some strategies that I'm using to manage the anxiety of not having enough work. And this is my second time going through this since I've started my business full time. You'll probably run into this at some point if you're relatively new to consulting or to having your own business in consulting, specifically where you're not supported by another service like a tree service. So I don't know what it's like in places where the winter maybe is too harsh to do any kind of work, but in my area you can work year round. I haven't noticed, and I've heard that other people have not noticed the patterns of fluctuation in the work. Sometimes you get a lot of work all at once, sometimes you don't get anything, and so that can generate a lot of anxiety. I would say that I generally do not feel that way because I do appreciate having free time, but the reason why I'm making this video is because I'm now probably in the slowest time that I've had since I went full-time into my business. I'm recording this video at the beginning of the last week of June 2025, and I have not made enough money in June to cover my bills, so I'm going to be dipping into savings. I was waiting the first, second week, just really feeling like, hey, I'm new in my business. I gotta appreciate the slow times because I know the work is there and it's gonna find me. But what I will never have again is this chill out period in the beginning where I can focus on figuring out how I want to do things, set up my templates, things like that, my processes. And so I spent maybe a little bit too long in that, and now I all of a sudden was like, oh shit, what if I don't have any work forever? Or I don't have any work for the foreseeable month or so. So I took some of these actions I also took a year ago when I first went full-time in my business, and that has really helped alleviate my anxieties. So I'm going to, for this video, assume that you have some degree of savings. That's good practice whether you're employed with a different company or especially if you're self-employed. So the first step is to get data on your actual situation. It's a lot easier to be carried away by emotions, especially negative, scary emotions, when you don't actually know your situation. So the first thing, which is good practice in general, is to know how much you spend, both personally and in a business sense. On the personal side, if you're a very spendy person, your business is going to have to make a lot more money to cover your expenses. That's important to find out what you actually spend, and you can break it down based on what you would normally spend and then what you could easily cut out, and then what you could absolutely cut out in times of absolute need. If you don't track your expenses, this is the time to figure that out, because again, you don't know how much you're spending, you don't know what you're spending it on, and that piece, how much you spend, is going to come into play for the next piece, which is to find out how much money you actually have. I'm going to talk more specifically on the business side, but you can pull in some money on the personal side. This also assumes that you've separated out your money into business and personal accounts, which is also a good practice. So for me, I feel emotionally I only have 1 to 2 months of income. But I looked at my accounts. I separated them out based on cash that I have right now in my business checking and savings account, then the money that I'm owed but that I haven't collected on because people like to take their time. Then I start looking at my personal money. Usually I would have a personal emergency fund, but I was relying on my business one for that right now. So I looked at my brokerage account where I have investments. Ideally, I wouldn't touch that, but I could if I had to. And then I also have separate retirement accounts. And this was really helpful because I found that in terms of cash that I have in my business bank accounts, I have about 3.5 months of not needing to do any work before I'm in trouble. And then if I get paid all the money for work that I've already done, that's going to add 1.5 months. So already that's 5 months before I run out of money. Then when I add in my personal investments, not the retirement stuff, then I get another 4 months. And if I absolutely have to dip into my retirement, I have a Roth IRA account where I can pull out the money that I've put in. I can't pull out extra, but I can pull out what I put in. It's obviously not ideal to have to touch your retirement account, but even without that, I have between 5 to 9 months of savings that would sustain me if I didn't get any jobs. So just feeling that was amazing. And I actually did this about a year ago when I first started working for myself full time. I hadn't saved enough money yet to feel fully comfortable. When I did this and I ran the numbers, I think I also had at least 6 months where I didn't need to do any work before I would exhaust my savings. So that was very helpful, and it goes extremely far in terms of reducing your anxiety. And the second big step is to take action. What I find for myself is that if I'm waiting for something to happen and I'm being very passive, it's like I'm leaving my feet up to the universe. I'm just kind of wafting around in the wind and going wherever the world takes me. If I take action, it feels like I'm taking control of my life and I'm doing things to change my situation. Whether it actually does or not, it just is a different approach. It's more active and less like victim feeling. So I just try to take action whenever possible. I think part of what contributed to my anxiety this time around is that I was just waiting for people to reach out to me, and I really didn't want to start doing anything yet to get clients. Ideally, you already have a list of stuff that you would do when the time is slow. When you're really busy with paid client work, you might not be able to think about how to improve the processes, like bidding on projects, building proposals. You don't have time to do that stuff because you're only focused on getting stuff out. Maybe there's journals, webinars, various articles that you've been meaning to read. You haven't had time to do that because you're just too busy. When you're really busy, you just learn enough to handle the assignment and then you move on. So if you maintain a list like that, then when work slows down, you can immediately just hop on looking at that list. You can also follow up with clients whose projects have gone on hold, and this applies more to construction. So let's say with a construction project, usually you might do a site visit and then they do some design stuff, and there's a big pause between your site visit and the final deliverable, which is the report. I don't normally follow up with clients unless there was a specific deadline when they needed something done. But in the past, if I was about to go on a long vacation, I would reach out as a courtesy and say, hey, I'm about to leave for a little bit. I have X amount of time to get your project report done. Are you ready for it? And that's one way of not putting pressure on the client to get to the next phase, but to just be courteous and say that you want to make sure you're accommodating them on a good timeline. So if you're not comfortable doing the follow-up, that could be one strategy that you take. It is also helpful to talk to other arborists to see what's like the state of the consulting industry at that time. Part of the reason why I feel a little bit more stressed is I talked to my friend who is based in Southern California. She's also noticed that it's slow. And then I talked to another arborist in my area, and she's also slow. But then I talked to another arborist, and she's not slow. So it helps you figure out at least, is this just me, or is this more of a industry-wide sort of slowness? In talking to those arborists, I have been vulnerable and expressed that I was slow, and one arborist offered to send me some work because their schedule wasn't going to be able to accommodate them. And I explicitly asked another arborist if they could send me their overflow work because I knew that they were actively turning things down. If there are arborists, people on the design team, certain clients that have repeatedly referred work to you, this is also a good time to express your gratitude, not just for the sake of getting more jobs, but just because it feels good as someone who does refer jobs out for another arborist to express their gratitude and say, hey, thank you for that. I took care of that client, really appreciate it. And it just makes people feel good and it makes them want to send you stuff more. This is also a good time to look at things that you've let slip, and this doesn't apply to people who are on their game, just for people who people like me. So there are gonna be things that you have let slip that relate to money. Maybe you didn't enter all your mileage, you misplaced some receipts and you didn't reimburse yourself or enter into QuickBooks. Maybe you forgot to invoice that client for some small thing. You can look through all your documents, your photos, things like that, and just make sure that you have those cleaned up, because they may not necessarily garner money now, but there will be some payoff in the future, whether that's reducing your taxes or making sure that you get a little bit of money that you're owed. I think especially if you're new to business like I am and you're not a business person, sometimes money can be a hard subject and it can feel awkward to ask for what you're owed, but this is good practice. Just now, I was thinking, oh, I only spent 20 minutes on that thing for the client. Should I bill them or not? And the answer is yes, I absolutely should. It's not a lot of money, which also means it's not a lot of money to them. If someone's gonna do a construction project, they have money to pay my small fee. And the last suggestion I have is to start looking at your expenses again. Not in the tracking sense, but in terms of how you can reduce your expenses. It depends on your upbringing and how you handle money, but as you make more money, especially if you're doing well self-employed, you're going to naturally experience lifestyle creep, and that's just where you have more money, you spend more money. There's a lot of things that you can do to manage your spending and not get into the slippery slope of spending a lot of extra money. If you like taking classes, are there classes that you can take online or on YouTube, so that if you need to cut back on these things, you can still maintain a certain habit, a certain lifestyle without spending the money for the premium option? I consider myself lucky in this front because I'm used to being frugal. So right now I can immediately think of all these things that I would like to have, but they're not absolutely necessary, at least not for me. That's just a good muscle to exercise so that when you actually need it, it's not a huge struggle and you won't feel super deprived. Just to put my, or just as an example, the things that I've done since a couple of days ago when I finally started panicking about this, I wanted to reach out to one arborist who had referred me a job, and I did. And it turns out he has moved away from the area and he's going to continue sending me clients, which is awesome. My city has a garden club that I meant to join. Turns out they're done meeting for the summer and I don't get to join until maybe September. And my plan there is also a very long-term plan. It's not that I intend to have clients immediately, but rather to just join plant people in my community and give a tree talk and educate people, and maybe something's gonna come out of that, but either way, it's just part of being in the community. I had this business idea related to CEUs, and I had reached out to someone about that, so I ended up following up on that, just to see if it's a direction that I could take now. It's not something that's gonna get me paid right now, but it's good to think of these things before I actually need them. And I have 4 or 5 other things that are on my list that I will continue to focus on in the upcoming weeks, just so that I get used to the muscle of looking for opportunities to continue reaching out to people. I think that people will note that it's more disingenuous if you wait until you actually need work and then you're just soliciting jobs at that point, as opposed to a more long-term sustainable approach where you're networking comfortably, casually, anytime throughout the year and throughout the years. So I guess we'll see how this turns out. This is a 2-month update from the end of that clip. I was going to end the video there, but I thought it might be more useful if I waited to see how things played out and how I acted based on my list of things I was going to do. I chose to focus on the CEU thing I mentioned. It's kind of like a business offering. It's a little bit of a risk in that it doesn't cost me money. It doesn't cost me a lot of money per se, but I wanted to try offering something different, and so I decided to see myself as the client and work on stuff for myself instead. It's kind of like passive income. Will it pay off? I mean, I probably won't find out for a few years, but it was nice to get that idea started because it's an idea that I've had for a while. And I had seen a video or something like that where it was, saying that yes, as a whatever service you're offering, you are getting paid to do it, but sometimes maybe there's something that you could do for yourself. Let's say passive income. I think these people were talking about online courses, things like that, that if you actually stopped and you took the time to invest in that and to move that forward, that would actually have more payoffs for you in the future compared to doing client work. So instead of seeking clients, I chose to be my own client. But in July, which was about a month after that first part of the video, I ended up getting multiple requests all in 1 week. So before that, for most of June and before, it was about one project request per 2 weeks, and I got 5 all in 1 week. I booked some of them, and that's what helped me flesh out my July income. Then I also had some clients who came back, with construction projects. There's various reasons for putting things on hold. Maybe they're going to redesign the project, they don't need the arborist report yet, things like that. And they all a whole bunch of them came back. So I was able to get some money that way. Some other things that I did that hopefully will have long-term benefits and kind of set in as a long-term habit was being a lot more responsive to clients. When you're busy and when you know that there are a lot of clients out there and there's a lack of consulting arborists, it may be easy to just not respond to people. And at some point it gets embarrassing if you haven't responded to them in, like half a week, 1 week, and then I just dropped the ball. But this time I started picking up any number that was coming through, and it's not necessarily that I would book those clients, but that it was a good habit to get into, because I do believe that customer service is important even for consulting arborists. I think that not everyone feels that way, but I'm trying to implement that a little bit more as a core part of my business. I also started reading some books. There was reference books for our industry, specifically for consulting/business. The first book was a consultant's legal guide, which is just for consultants in general. Then I also reread tree law cases in the USA, and I did a book review for that. So these are things to just read with a little bit more scrutiny. I don't necessarily glean all the information from it the first time around because I do read it a little bit more quickly, but I annotate, I write stuff in the book, and that way in the future when I go back and read it, I'll have a different layer of it. And I at least know that if I need more information on something, I know which book to look for it in. So hopefully I'll be able to keep that up. Maybe I have like 25 minutes of reading in me per day. It's not too much, it's not every day, but it's movement. So my kind of like overview for the last 3 months was I went red in June. July, I actually was a little bit green, so I made a little bit extra money. And this month, I might, August, depending on how this last week goes, I might dip a little bit into red or break even. But last month was good enough to basically help me break even across all 3 months. So moving forward, we'll see how that goes. I'm not quite as panicked, but I definitely know that there are certain things I'm not going to do this year. Like, I'm not going to contribute anymore to my retirement. I overdid that earlier in the year, so I can always just wait and see how things play out. It was also really motivating for different people in my life. Actually, my business buddy and a close friend, they offered to lend me some money if necessary, and I was like, well, I really appreciate that, but I don't want to get there. So I'm gonna work a lot harder to make to bring in extra income, um, to be the best consulting arborist I can be, and also offer really good customer service without pressuring people to use my services. I think that's really important for people to feel like you're offering value without being pressured into doing things. It's been a good experience, especially because I was personally on the other end of a really aggressive sales call, like from some solar people. And I know that I never want my clients to feel that way when they're talking to me. I don't know if I'm going to do a follow up to this because I think this is the sort of thing that is just going to be cyclical. And we just have to feel comfortable with that anxiety in ourselves, and then do as much as you can do on the side, limit your exposures, increase your financial buffer and things like that. It's just part and parcel of working for yourself or being a consulting arborist in general.